Have you ever lost a friend or a loved one to drugs? I have. My father was a Navy sailor for many years, and he got hurt one day and broke his tailbone. And needless to say, he was prescribed pain pills for a period of over 5 years, and they fed him to him and fed him to him and fed him to him, and eventually his addiction got the better of him, and he was hooked on them all the time. Fill in the blank, my mother left him, his addiction got worse, and it was just downhill from there. It eventually killed him. The opioid epidemic has swept across the United States in recent years, and this fast-spreading plague has become a major public health issue, claiming the lives of more Americans each year than guns or car accidents. This is a national emergency and needs to be treated as such. The opioid crisis has recently been declared a public health emergency by the Trump administration. It is important for people to understand the issue so they can be part of the solution. Despite this so-called war on drugs we've been fighting for so long, the citizens of our country have plenty of access to a plethora of illegal drugs. Because there is a demand, there will always be a supply, regardless of laws. This epidemic is caused by drug addictions. Americans battle substance abuse, millions of them. Most individuals will struggle with it at some point in their life. And an opioid addiction is the hardest to kick, and they're very easy to get from a doctor or a drug dealer. Many people blame doctors for overprescribing opioids. For example, if my father hadn't been prescribed all those pills for so long by the VA, he may not have developed such a bad addiction. After people take opiates for so long, they develop a tolerance and they need something stronger to feed their addiction, which is what happened to my father. Thousands of people turn to heroin when the pills no longer work for them. Heroin alone kills thousands of men, women, and children every year. We always see it on the news, the people passing out in their cars from heroin, kids getting a hold of it and dying from the heroin. It's really tragic. In the past year alone, I personally know 9 people who have overdosed, friends, family, and an ex-girlfriend. Because we live in a society that enables such addictions, we're always going to have this issue. Our citizens and our government need to do more to combat this opioid crisis. Our society ineffectively deals with drug addicts, and although families of addicts try to help them, the individual addict has to make up the decision to quit themselves, regardless of what happens to them in jail and regardless of what happens to them in their family life. Our society ineffectively deals with drug addicts. We give people free needles to make their habits safer, which only enables the habits further, and then when addicts are incarcerated, they don't get any help. So basically, outside jail, we're like, here, yeah, have the needles. Here's a safe injection site. And by the way, we got Narcan in the back of the truck in case you overdose. But in jails, they get very little help. They have to quit cold turkey, and that's not how you rehabilitate a drug addiction. And despite efforts of U.S. law enforcement and rehab centers nationwide, addicts everywhere have plenty of access to their poison and delivery devices, no matter what. Our government needs to turn their focus to efforts of rehabilitation of addicts. We need to help people instead of enabling their habits outside of jail and not helping them inside. We can't keep contradicting our own efforts. Until we come together and start doing more for the troubled addicts of our country, we will continue to see this epidemic spread. America has a long road ahead and a lot of changes to make before this epidemic will end. Millions of Americans fall victim to drug addiction every year, which can arguably be considered a disease, and if this disease progresses, it often leads to the use of heroin. Our government is not doing enough to properly keep heroin off the streets and rehabilitate addicts. The U.S. government needs to declare the opioid epidemic a national emergency in order to allocate more resources and funds to the resolution of this huge problem. like I said, we have a long road ahead as a country, but millions of Americans are losing friends and loved ones every year to opioids, and this tragedy is far from over. There's no way to promptly solve this issue, so our society needs to work together to progressively end this opioid epidemic over the next several years.